Today, we are here to speak with two pretty legendary people, in my estimation, Skip Simpson and Larry Houston. Big round for them, please. I want to give you a little tiny quick background to kind of stick to a little bit of the formality. These men are quite accomplished. They're both Renaissance men. Truly, their talents are not just visually artistic. They are not just comic book based. Larry is an Emmy Award winner. He has worked on, well, yes. If you have an Emmy, you're important and special. And only if you have an Emmy. He, or in my case, a Tony, but that's another story. He is the producer-director of the X-Men TV show. I don't know if any of you ever saw that. He was also the director of Captain Planet, Fantastic Four's second season, G.I. Joe the movie. The list goes on. All-Star Squadron is one of his projects, print projects. League of Champions, which I didn't know was yours, but that's a deep cut. And if you have the recent collection, the He-Man and the Masters of the Universe Minicomics collection, you can find out more about both of these men and their work. Skip is a colorist, but also a composer, and he worked extensively on these mini-comics, both for Masters of the Universe and Princess of Power. I don't know if this is true of everyone who is a fan of these brands, but to me, the box art and the mini-comics were my first introduction to the stories. Is that true for the multitude of people here, perhaps? And then the cartoon happened, and I was full-on Team Orko, but that's neither here nor there. The magic that is created by that art, and particularly by the colors. These brands are full of vibrant color, and I think that tells a story on its own, something that is kind of missing from a lot of the comparable brands back then. And I want to talk more about that later, but I was hoping that both of you could introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about your backgrounds, but then more about how you were introduced to Mattel and these brands, and keep it mostly friendly.
Okay. Go ahead. I'll go. Hello, everyone. This is my first PowerCon or any con, actually. This is the first time I've had the opportunity to speak about the work that I did on the Minicomics. And just to give you an idea where it started for me was I was working at a studio, which was actually my first industry job, with a fellow named Lee Nordling. And we weren't doing comic art, we were doing commercial type work for McDonnell Douglas and companies like that. But Lee is a cartoonist. He was president of CAPS, which is Cartoonist Artists Professional Society in Los Angeles. Yeah. And he had gotten a call from somebody at Mattel through another friend that they were looking for somebody to work on some comic art for a toy line. He didn't get a lot of details, but he went in and it turned out it was for Masters of the Universe. And they wanted to have him do a test to start with. So at work, he told me about that, and he invited me to be part of that as the colorist to do the test. That was delivered. They loved the work, and they ordered 15 more. I think it was about that. They went to, because this was the first packaged Masters of the Universe toys. And I was not a colorist. I was frankly not a comic person. but I was a painter, I was an illustrator, and if I show you where it started for me, because I look at the early ones, and somehow I got through them, but I think I went and looked at what other people were doing. I found some reference. It gave me enough to finish the test, as well as we got started pretty quickly on the next round. And this happens to be, if you can see that, this is Larry's work. And he could talk more about these first ones that he did and the story behind that, but this was, I think, one of the first ones I did. And so to give you some context on how these were made, they wanted to have the artwork, and I like this idea because normally you do a piece of art that's bigger and it's reduced, and you can get some resolution out of doing it that way. But the schedule did not allow for that because there's a lot more painting involved if you're doing it a larger size. So the decision was made to do these at the final size. So this is one of the few that I still have, and this shows you, this is the actual painted artwork. And underneath this is a lined version of the same art. So I had lines to follow to actually paint this. This is done with a 2/0 brush, mostly a very small brush, and maybe a little bit larger, but these were done in real time. And frankly, I never went back and repainted anything. It was what it was because I had so many more to do to complete the project. So that's the color plate, and this becomes the black plate once you add that in. That's how these were all done. They were produced 4 up on a board, and also included in each one were the lettering layer, all done by Stan Sakai, who an incredible artist, as well as the lettering that he did, which he did, I think, on every single, at least master's books, right?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that process and the difference between something like a storyboard? We were talking earlier about how the Princess of Power minicomics started out more like comic books and then turned into kind of illustrated storybooks, tales, and
Right.
the term storyboard gets thrown around in a lot of visual media. I'm just curious if, Larry, you could talk about that and perhaps about how, when you guys first worked together.
Okay.
Yeah, my expertise when I got into the animation business was mainly as a storyboard artist, and that's how I got into the business. I'm not sure how to. I don't have any experience in the first part of what you said, comparing storyboards to, what was it again?
It seems like there's, in my research, there was a difference between how some of these later She-Ra mini-comics became laid out differently or illustrated differently, and I kept reading the idea storyboard was the term. That could be wrong.
Those are illustrations. I would. Yeah, they're not telling a story, but they're doing some really illustrative graphics, which is
right.
Fantastic to look at. The storyboards, you could think of storyboards more as a choreography of the action.
Right.
Like if a guy's going to walk into a room, pick this up, and then drink it, I have to draw the guy coming in. I got to draw the guy picking it up, then I got to do that. So for one drawing, I'm doing like 4 panels of the whole thing. So it's more choreography.
Right.
This is like good design illustrations, and it is fantastic work. But yeah.
Would you say the difference perhaps between those and what you're talking about with the action, illustrated action, is that the action is more worded?
Yes. And when the person draws those kind of drawings, they're picking like the key moment of
Right.
whatever the scene is, and just illustrating that part of whatever the text is. Though that's at least that's the way I approached it. It's like read what the writer's saying, get an image, and then just draw that, which would try and tell the entire story. And sometimes when they're doing that, then somewhere in the text, the subtext is there, but you just try and catch the major parts of what the writer was looking for.
Did you find yourself limited at all with the other style, with the having to draw? I mean, you probably want to illustrate as much as you could, but you're limited to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 8 to 10, 12 pages at best for these. What kind of challenges did you overcome as far as the limitations go? Because I think you're probably getting Mattel saying you have to include this, and this character, vehicle, playset.
Yeah.
So
What I would get from Mattel was these are the vehicles, or this is the character for the story, and the story would be pretty broad and open, like as to what's going to happen. So for me, I would take at that point when I was doing these books, I had been working in animation for about 6 years. So, but before that, I was always a fanboy. I was always drawing my own comic books and my own Avengers, my own Fantastic Four, or whatever. So I had been a storyteller of sequential storytelling like you'd see in a regular comic book. And then when I got into animation, once I was able to understand what storyboards were, I took both of those disciplines, and when I got the scripts to do these things, I kind of like merged them together because, the artwork, like he was working at the small size, I was working at something, 8.5 by 11 that's going to go down to like this size, and I had to tell the story clearly so that when it shrank, it didn't get all mushed, and the storytelling was like, what is that? So I kind of merged those two disciplines together for the mini-comics to make them work. Yeah, like that. Like I had to pick key moments. Like for me, it was like I tried to make myself imagine I was drawing a Marvel comic book and try and illustrate the action and storytelling that way. But then also merge it with like, guess what? It's going to shrink. So I didn't put a lot of detail and stuff because I knew it was going to shrink and stuff. So I just had to make the scenes very graphic, but try and make them very bold and exciting at the same time. So it was a challenge. And so, basically, if the key thing was like showing this toy, okay, I figure out a composition, put the toy there, but that's not the main reason for the illustration. It's showing how strong the guy is that He-Man's going to take on and stuff. I've had a lot of fans come by and tell me they really liked the story I did of Clash of Arms with Man of Arms, where he was taking on all these characters. And that was actually a very fun issue that I drew because it was like the first ones without He-Man.
right.
It was just this one guy being attacked by 3 or 4 people.
Right.
And so I just said, okay, it's a wrestling match, let's go for it. And had stuff happen, this happened and that happened. I did a mental choreography in my head. It's like if I was doing this for television, how would it look? And I just tried to apply that stuff to it. Oh yeah, that's which one is that? Double-edged sword, yeah. Well, the plants attack the world. So yeah.
It's funny you mentioned, you actually started talking about a question I wanted to ask, was your history as kids. Were you fans of swords and sorcery and sci-fi and comic books? Obviously, we know you were.
Yeah.
Skip, was that your thing?
I was not into comics. I read comics, but it was not my world.
Right.
I was interested in painting and color, really. That was where my head was at. It was, and frankly, it wasn't the story. I was not into the world that's created within the the comics and the congruity between the comics and that sort of thing. I did become, once I got into these, I was really captivated by the whole world that it created.
Did you have a mentor as a child, or was someone in your family a painter that taught you or exposed you to that?
I had an aunt who was a painter. She encouraged me. I was always creative. I was more into building models, so I was always doing something creative. But it was actually 3D was my...
Right.
I ended up doing a lot of 3D animation after this in Maya, and I learned all the programs, and that became my world. So the 3D, the dimensions within the scene, I naturally gravitated to. And that shows up, I think, in the colors that I picked.
Yeah. It's, I think, obvious that you've both created a through line stylistically through a lot of these mini comics. One of the reasons I brought up the Princess of Power ones and that change, that the first wave had a certain style that was much more familiar to those of us who had already been collecting Masters of the Universe, because it was more comic book style. Right. There was more action. It was edgier. I mean, if you look at that first story of She-Ra, there's a wonderful panel of Catra, and she looks like she could rip your face off. And it's great. I mean, I loved that. And then it became more gentle. Were there demands placed on you as far as what tonal changes might be needed, what mood changes might be needed, if any, once you had already submitted paintings? Or was that what you get, what you see is what you get?
Honestly, I was given full reign to do whatever I felt was right.
Wow.
And you could look at the stuff throughout, and you'll notice that it's as bright as could possibly be. This was a toy, right? And that was, for me, the Mattel look was bright colors, carefully. I never was afraid to paint a background that was maybe not exactly the background that had preceded it.
Right.
I always added backgrounds to bring the characters out. Mm-hmm. And often I would paint the characters first. It was like, boom.
If you don't do that, you're not a professional.
Yeah.
At least once. At least once.
But yeah, I guess, and maybe frankly, a lot of this, I do not remember the order, but apparently this book is done in the order they were produced.
Yeah.
So this one is the first
and
She-Ra book.
That She-Ra book, interestingly enough, I don't know if other people found it this way, but it was included by Mattel as an insert in Barbie magazine to promote it to girls, because boys were sort of aware already, I guess. I remember being in the supermarket and ripping that book out of the Barbie magazine, because I was not allowed to look at Barbie magazine, because this was the 80s, and if you were caught in the pink aisle, you went to purgatory for the rest of your life. And it was reversed. The order of the pages were reversed, and then the toy release, they had fixed it, I think. But I have to say that the creation of the backgrounds you were saying, those things, once you've read those a couple times and you've gleaned the story, that becomes even more a source of the imaginative world that kids are creating. Do you think that nowadays kids are being offered the same sort of opportunity to create for themselves some of that, or do you think it's more handed to them? There are technological advances, obviously. Kids have a lot more access to media. Do you think, and there are pluses and minuses, but do you think, as far as original art made for kids media, do you think that there is as much of an impact on kids as there may have been when you were doing this?
It's kind of hard to say. You're correct about the technology being more so than before. And I've seen a lot of visually a lot of very exciting work out there. I think it's only a personal opinion, but I don't see a lot of the fun we had with these books in the stuff that's out today. And it's very, I can't put my finger on it, but it's just the fun part is not as much in today's that it was in the old days. And one thing that you ran into, that I ran into when we were doing the He-Man books, is that pretty much they hired us for our experience. And so when they gave me a story, I never got changes. They hired me based upon my experience and that I knew what I was doing. So I would tell the story as best I can, knowing that I was drawing to a certain demographics. I wasn't drawing to teenagers, I was drawing to people who watched the show at that time. So I tried to gear it for that type of audience, but make it as exciting as you could. And so I would take the scripts and just have fun with it. But I knew the parameters of what I was doing, but I don't get the same feeling of fun in the stuff today that you grew up, like all of you grew up with. I could be wrong, but that's the feeling that I get from that.
There are quite a few fan favorite mini comics from Masters of the Universe in particular that you guys worked on. We have the Temple of Darkness, and if you're a fan of classics, the Classics line, that was kind of one of the more significant repaint figures we ended up getting 20 years later, which was gratifying. There's Hordak, the Ruthless Leader, kind of intro to Hordak, which is pretty fantastic. The Stench of Evil, which is a favorite of a lot of us because of Stinkor, who never made it into any other media because of the fart jokes. You guys already talked about the Battle of Roboto, and I wanted to talk a bit about the Powers of Grayskull mini-comic, because that was the last one from the vintage line. It was supposed to introduce the Powers of Grayskull rebranding.
Okay.
Is that in here?
The contents will let you know. It introduced the character Hero in Shadow.
Oh, right. That was me.
And we got, and we had, this is like the question I've been dying to ask.
This is the book.
Yeah.
The Legend
The Legend Begins.
So
that was actually my last issue.
Yeah, I think it was the last published one. I think
Yes.
there might have been one that was not actually delivered to us.
yes.
As a kid, and this may be true for others, I was very excited that there was a new hero coming. I didn't know who that was. There was like a box art panel that showed Hero a little bit, and then this magic user who seemed to be the new hero that was coming in.
Right.
We had a version created as a sequel in the Classics line, which served the purposes of the narrative being created for Classics,
Right.
which was very specific. I'm wondering how much you remember about what was intended for that continuation, or if it had been written.
The issue after the one I did, they never sent me the script, so I had no idea what was going to happen after mine's. You only get what you're supposed to, like an actor only get the lines, and they'd have no idea where it fits in the context of a film sometimes. No, they gave me parameters of show a figure in deep shadow. They gave me, at least I could do the his instrument that it was using to use the magic from. But no, they told me nothing. So I just said, okay, I'll just make this a mysterious figure in the background.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned his wand weapon, because that evolved, and there are other examples I think of things that may have evolved from the time Mattel chose to produce the toy or designed the toy,
Right.
to the production, and then you guys are making the mini comic. But while that's happening, you have design changes due to materials being expensive or safety issues or whatever. There is the Slave City mini-comic with the character Lodar, who appears and is kind of this dark master and kind of terrible, overlord. And I've read that was initially supposed to be Zodak, and that the name Lodar became Lodar because you had to, whoever was working on the penciling had to erase parts of the name, and so Zodak became Lodar because the image did not match the toy that they
Right.
had. And
Oh, okay.
were there a lot of, maybe you're not aware because they didn't tell you, but were there other examples of near misses that may have happened? We have Tila in a lot of different looks, and sometimes as a kid I thought, is this someone else? So I would wonder, or are they just like a regular person wearing something different that day?
Well, like in the case of Slave City, when they gave me the script, I asked them, the first thing I always did, where's the toy? Or where's a drawing? What does the character look like? And they said, we have nothing. And so I said, can I make it up? And I said, sure. So pretty much I made the character, the first panel I drew him in, that's how he was going to look all the ways. I just let a stream of consciousness come to me, and I just said, okay, what would that look like? Oh, okay, it looks like, put these little spikes. Yeah, just, okay. Now he looks like a badass. Oh, sorry about that. And I just made it up as it went along. I had been working on other shows like, G.I. Joe, Transformers, and every time I would work on a show, they'd give you, either they'd send us a toy or they'd send us the box art so we could make the cartoons match what it should look like. But in the case of Lodar and Slave City, they gave nothing, so I just have some fun. I mean, even the minions and stuff, just kind of like, I just had fun, and man, it was like a kid in the candy store for me, because I was an artist that my goal was to get out of high school and go work for Marvel Comics in New York. And I knew nobody, had no money, so that wasn't going to happen. And so I kind of the next best thing was I had friends that were working at Disney and the Hanna-Barbera and stuff, so my life kind of segued into animation, which actually in the long run, it turned out to be the best choice, because I was able to utilize my storytelling skills from comic books and also merge what was coming out. I had I love film, so I kind of merged the two together to eventually become a director in animation. But also when I got a chance to do the Minicomics, I was like, oh boy, I didn't work for Marvel, but now I get a chance to do it here. I just poured all of my imagination and fun and put it on the page in it. And I never got any changes from them. Wow. I think the most I got back with Lee told me, there was a lot of fighting in Slave City. And I just said, well, just having some fun, I remember what it's like to be 8 or 9 years old. I think I was 27, 28. So I was kind of trying to channel my inner child when I'm drawing this stuff, to have some fun with it. Because I figure if I can make that part of me get excited about what I'm doing, hopefully it'll translate either in the drawings or the show I'm directing, that kind of stuff.
Right. When you talked about the freedom you had, I've seen Skip going through photos that all of you want to see. They are, I'm assuming, examples of what Larry's talking about.
Can I show
Oh,
this?
sure, yeah.
Okay.
Mattel's not here.
Okay, well.
In this room.
For me too. Yeah. I wouldn't get the toy. It's not even conceived completely. Yeah. So they would give me.
There are people in lands far away who want to hear your words.
Okay. This is a new experience for me.
Yes,
and I'm loving it.
It never really ever gets old. There's always something that.
I'll just say that this all happened 8 years ago. And this was like the best time of my life almost, with the freedom I had to do something. And talking about notes back, never.
Wow.
They liked what they saw. And there was a time crunch to get it to the printer, to
that
get
really
it into
helps
production.
a lot.
So,
Yes, approved. Go.
well, yeah, That's good. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think I ever got a note or even a message from Lee, they want to change this or that. I didn't.
Wow.
They were happy with what I gave them.
That's unusual.
And well, it is.
From that company, I mean.
Oh, yeah.
From
a
what I
lot of
hear.
notes from a lot of different people sometimes.
Right.
And it's very difficult. But here's just I'll start with this guy. This would be a typical reference for me. Who knows the character?
The Squeeze, one of the Snake Men.
Thank you.
But no telling how long the arms were.
How about this one?
You get to make it up.
You,
Snake Face.
if you know it,
Wow.
tell us.
Okay.
And Blast Attack from behind.
How about, what's this?
Rotar's Axe.
Wow.
Bring it on.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it is? Adam?
Yeah, that's Adam.
That was
At least
hard.
I know that one.
Guys know it all. Who? The back of somebody.
Oh, that's Hero.
Okay.
Where is that toy?
More of this.
See, you're getting all the answers you go to ask.
I've been wanting to know, and you're helping me.
Yes.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Hero. The back of.
Tongue Lasher. Another Snake Man. Or Snake Frog.
Oh, and. How about that?
Oh, the Evil Horde robot, which was never made, but
this?
ended up in some press material.
Mothman, yeah.
Mothman.
There you go.
Well, anyway, these are typically when I got the work, which would be the finished line inked drawings on board, and there were usually 11 or 12, and then Lee would give me an envelope filled with these kinds of things. I'll keep going because you're having fun.
I'm going to talk a little bit.
Okay,
I
so
just want to talk a little bit about something while you're showing those.
okay,
Just to speak on the freedom again, Larry, your images for and the action throughout The Secret Liquid of Life, you created quite a few characters visually in that story. You have Prince Dacon and Geldor, who we ended up getting in the classics line, which was satisfying. The prince's fiance, Marin, and her father, Torgal,
Right.
characters of color, which was not common.
No, it wasn't back then.
And, depending on where you grew up, depending on, the house you were raised in, that was either something completely familiar or not at all. And I wonder, especially with the announcement today that Ela Easen's Sunman line is being incorporated into Mattel's Origins effort, which I think is a really beautiful thing because that line is fantastic on its own legs. Why would be, I don't know that people understand why we didn't get those as toys. So you have Prince Dacon, who's listed as a friend of He-Man, or friend of Prince Adam anyway, and
Right.
a really dynamic-looking character. Why didn't we get that figure?
Well, I think one of the reasons you didn't get that for quite some time is that, it didn't originate with Mattel. It originated from my imagination. And again, it was like, I don't have the toy, can I make it up? And so I said, I was friends with people who were still working at Filmation. I knew the concept, but it wasn't working on the show. But I wanted to expand the universe of the He-Man universe, and so I wanted to explain the show that there were black people in that culture, in that issue. So, and good ones and bad ones, and just like any society. And I just wanted to do that. And at the time when I was drawing it, Mr. T and all the rest, it was popular. So okay, Mr. T Top, here we go. And I just started designing him. He basically, the first time I drew him was when it came, I didn't design him, I just kind of drew it, and it's like, okay, that's him. And that's the same thing with the other characters. I just kind of drew them, stream of consciousness, creating the characters. And there was I I can't remember the title, but there was another one where, again, no characters. So I created a community of Asian characters.
Yeah. Rana, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I did one where it was a community of Native American characters. I think that's what that one is.
Yeah.
So on my own, it's like, well, let me just expand the world so that the world looks more inclusive for everybody. And so it was just something I, wanted to do. And they said no. They didn't say no.
Right.
But the reason you never got those characters as toys is because they came from here. And, so since it didn't come from them, it came from me,
Well, maybe.
Thanks. Yeah.
Some of the characters.
Who you went with?
Some of the characters became toys.
Yes.
And I was watching an interview with you, Larry, with these three very fanatic fans showed, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
They showed a couple of the new ones that had come out, and you had never seen the toy.
No.
One of them was with the chains. It had
Oh, right.
the chains, which you got in trouble for, maybe?
Oh, Lodar, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
It's a little dark. Like
it was a little, yeah.
I mean, depending on your perspective, but
I was just having fun. It was like, it was like I was trying to make it like a Marvel book. I didn't, there were parameters, you don't go beyond because it's the dimmer, you're drawing for kids at that certain age. But thought I pushed the envelope and, it wasn't like He-Man punched the guy once and he's down. It's like, it was a back and forth, the seesaw, Thing versus the Hulk, bang, 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 And then finally, He-Man does whack, takes him out.
Right.
But it was more like, Hulk versus Thing, that kind of stuff.
it felt like an evolution. I mean, as we all aged through that collection and buying those our parents buying those things, and it felt like the stories became more sophisticated, and the visuals obviously helped that happen.
And like that picture right there, I was trying my best to do like a John Buscema, montage of stuff going on. And it was like, oh, okay.
But it's amazing because I think it makes it ignites your imagination even more than if it's just the static.
Right.
Those action shots with those kind of mini scenes in there really do offer a kid an opportunity to create the play scenario.
Right.
And in the end, I think that's one of the most important things was in service to these children, absorbing, buying this media. I think both of you are incredibly valuable people, and many of us are so grateful to you both for having created such amazing art and
Thank you.
and incredible stories. Even and encouraging some people I know to become artists. We have Axel Jimenez, who's working on the line now, who recalls your work as being influential to him, and it's clear. So thank you, both of you, for being here and for the work you've done and continue to do. I think we may have time for one or two questions. I think we're doing that. There's a microphone here if you want to all run and knock each other over to get there.
The lights got to blind us.
I've done that in the past. Yeah, it is really, it's...
This is a question for Larry. Skip showed us the little flip book where he had hand-painted that little miniature-sized painting, and then they do the line art over. When you were doing the 8.5 by 11 size, was it a similar process? Were you painting with like acrylic or oil or something, or was it like more of a markers and what was your medium that you were using for those?
You mean for when I was drawing the Minicomics? Mm-hmm. Pretty much I had a blank sheet of paper and a pencil, and that's it. It's like, okay, what do I do now? A separate inker? Oh yeah, the inkers that I had was a Bruce Timm, the guy who went on to become the director of the Batman animated series.
Nice.
And but we were both just artists at the time, because we both got into the industry at the same time at working at Filmation Studios. And so when Bruce became the director of Batman, I became the director of X-Men, almost the same year. But back then, when we were doing the mini-comics, it was just, hey, we're just guys having fun, drawing stuff, inking stuff, and that was one of the inkers I worked with. The other ones were, unfortunately, I can't recall their names right now, but, oh, God, how could I forget that? Yeah, Jim Mitchell did some incredible work for me, for Mattel on the work I did. He did we did a newspaper strip, that's right. And it didn't go, but he did I think I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think I did a whole week's worth of He-Man stuff, a He-Man syndicated strip. He inked all of them. I got them at my table. You could take a look at it. And he did great work, fantastic work. I wish he had been here so he could talk about it,
Jim was to be here. He was not feeling good, but he wanted to be here. And Jim was, we're good friends. My wife and I know Jim. And that's how I met my wife, actually, through Jim Mitchell.
Oh, okay.
So I have a lot to, okay. Now I talked to Lee, and I maybe tell the story a little bit about Lee Nordling.
We have a minute, but tell it.
A minute. Okay, well, Lee just told me, I talked to him, and sorry he was here. Jim was a friend from CAPS, and he didn't realize, but Jim Mitchell turns out to be one of the greatest of all comic artists. I mean,
yeah.
And he did, if you go through the book, you'll find a lot of Jim Mitchell and brilliant. The amount of talent we had, and the writing, and for me, the color would be nothing without the Larry Houston.
Well, they all magically support each other. It's really unique.
Yeah.
Beautiful work.
I think, what helped us a lot, like we spoke before, is that they allowed us to do what we do best. And they didn't try and, micromanage us. They just said they hired you to be a colorist, they hired you to be an artist. Go forth and, they let us do it and didn't try and change stuff, So I think that comes through in the final product.
Yeah, I would agree. The freedom is pretty key for any artist, but especially in that kind of corporate environment, it's I would imagine somewhat unique. And again, you've created amazing work, and we're incredibly grateful. Can we have a hand for these gentlemen, please? Thank you.